What's up, guys? Carolina Jackpot coming at you. It is Wednesday, July 17th, 2019, and depending on who your team is and when they get started, we're anywhere from between 43 to 45 days away from college football getting going. If you're a Miami or a Florida fan, your team gets started even quicker than that. So I'm all into it. The SEC and ACC media days are going on this week. Of course, there's all kind of writers down there covering the SEC media days. They're interested in a lot of different teams. The ACC media days is going on as well. They're interested in one team. You can take your guess about who that is. But today, we're going to be talking Big 12 football, and we are going to be talking the Texas Longhorns. They think in 2019 that they can be the ones to unseat the Oklahoma Sooners. Sooners have won the past 4 Big 12 championships. Are they going to make it 5, or is Texas going to take them down finally in 2019? What's going on, guys? Carolina Jackpot checking in. So the Longhorns, according to Las Vegas, are about 9.5 wins this year, give or take. 9.5 seems to be the number that everybody has up there, so that's what I'm going to go with for the purposes of this video. They were 10-4 last year, 7-6-1 against the spread. The team seemed to really get up for the big games last year, and then some of the games that were against lesser competition, they maybe didn't get up as well for. In case in point, they lost to Maryland for the second year in a row in the opener. They lose to Oklahoma State when you were ranked number 6th. And then you had some close wins versus Texas Tech, which was a terrible team, Tulsa, which was a terrible team, and then you kind of allowed Kansas to get a backdoor cover on you late in the season when you down by 3 scores late in the game. So kind of got to clean up some of that stuff. The 7-6-1 record against the spread suggests that your number might have been inflated just a little bit there. You capped it off with, of course, an appearance in the Big 12 championship game against the Oklahoma Sooners, and you lost, actually knocking them off in the regular season, but you lost the championship game where it actually counts. So many players, including quarterback Sam Ehlinger, have vowed that that will not happen again this year and that y'all are going to take care of business. You capped it off with a 28-21 victory over Georgia in the Sugar Bowl, in a game that really wasn't even as close as that final score indicated. I mean, you dominated Georgia, came out there and outplayed them in all phases of the game. Look at this. Georgia was a team last year, as you know, and almost every year, they run the ball at will against teams, a lot of teams. Your defense was not one of the best in the country last year, and that's not a knock on Texas. It just wasn't. You're giving up an average of 131 yards a game on the ground. You held Georgia, one of the nation's best rushing teams, to 72 yards on the ground. Very impressive stuff there. And if that type of play can continue, I have no doubt that you can overtake Oklahoma in the Big 12. That's going to be a high level of play to sustain, though. Tom Herman, in his 3rd year as coach of the Longhorns, you were 6-6 in the regular season in 2017. You followed that up with a bowl win against Missouri, and then last year, of course, you won your bowl game against Georgia. 2 years in a row, wins over SEC teams in bowl games. Nothing to sneeze at. That's a good job. You had the number 3 recruiting class in 2018. And in 2019, you had the number 3 recruiting class once again. But you actually lost a player off that recruiting class, and we're going to talk about that here in just a few minutes. Of course, quarterback Sam Ehlinger, the aforementioned, returns as a junior. 25 touchdowns last year through the air, only 5 interceptions. That's an excellent ratio. There's a lot of college football quarterbacks out there who do not have a ratio anywhere near as close to that. 3,300 yards through the air. He also rushed for a net of 482 yards and 16 touchdowns. 16 touchdowns on the ground, which you got to figure most of that was in goal line situations, and I'm not sure if those were designed quarterback runs or he just decided to take off running himself. But you kind of think that you don't want your quarterback scoring that much. I mean, it's great that he can, but it also lends him to being open to getting injured, getting a knee clipped, getting an ankle clipped, something bad happening there. And if that happens, you know, I think your season's going to take a turn for the worst, most likely. Keontae Ingram is returning. He's going to be the starting running back this year. Was the backup last year to Trey Watson. He's 708 yards on the ground last year and 3 touchdowns. 5 yards per carry, solid back. You have a highly touted true freshman coming in, Jordan Whittington, who will be backing him up. At the wide receiver position, you lost your most productive receiver from last year, Lil Jordan Humphreys, who declared early and went to the NFL draft. But in 2017, Colin Johnson was your most productive receiver. He comes back this year. This is a 6'6" guy playing receiver for y'all. He should create some real mismatches against a lot of defensive backs out there. 985 yards last year, 7 touchdowns. I look for him to do some big things this year. Devin Duvernay will be another one in wide receiver position, 546 yards last year and 4 touchdowns. Now, part of that number 3 recruiting class was Brew McCoy, a 5-star from out in California who had originally committed, when he initially committed, it was to the USC Trojans. Then he decommitted from them and committed to Texas, and he enrolled with you in January. So he was part of your 2019 recruiting class, which was number 3. Well, he left after spring practice and went back to Southern Cal. And I don't get that. One of the radio hosts around here in the upstate of South Carolina was talking about that and was kind of talking about how, Herman was, going back out to California to try to get this kid and blah, 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 and this and that and the other, and like it was a bad thing or something. I mean, and I don't really understand that. Well, heck yeah, if you got a 5-star who's gone somewhere, yeah, I'm going to go try to talk to him and get him to come back. I mean, what's wrong with that? Anyway, he's gone. He's at Southern Cal. So he was part of that number 3 recruiting class. So if you take him out, you got to kind of figure it really wasn't the number 3 class. Well, that's probably pretty close, though. Big blow, 5-star who won't be part of your rotation this year. He was number 1 in his position coming out of high school. That's the bad stuff. You're replacing 3 offensive linemen last year from last year's team. You do return your center, Zach Shackelford, who is a Remington Award candidate. He anchors your offensive line. You got to replace him with some stars. You are adding in a transfer from Georgia Tech, grad transfer Parker Braun, who has 32 starts at Georgia Tech. You might kind of scoff at that and say, well, Georgia Tech. But look at it this way. You want to run the football, who better to bring in than a kid who was at Georgia Tech under Paul Johnson? What's he been doing? He's been run blocking for years. So that should be a feather in your cap as far as the transfer route goes. This unit there should be just as good as it was last year. Your defense, number 67 in the country last year, which was actually good for number 3 in the Big 12. And like I said, your number doesn't really pop out there, but you were really good in that bowl game against one of the best rushing attacks in the country. If you can sustain that level of play, that's going to be huge towards making a move in 2019, especially against Oklahoma. But you have to replace 8 starters off that defense, including your top 3 tacklers. Okay, defensive coordinator, it's his name, Tony Orlando. He does a really good job. The safety and nickel positions, Brandon Jones is your 4th leading tackler. He's coming back. And then Caden Stearns, who was a freshman All-American last year, led you in interceptions with 4. Those guys have experience. They're coming back in the defensive backfield, so you may be okay there. Up front, and your linebackers for front 7 is where you may have a few problems. Texas actually runs kind of like a different defense. It's like a 3-3-4 where most of the tension is put on the back end. So maybe, losing some of those starters up front is not going to be as big of a deal as it would be with some other teams. And you've recruited well across the board. I mean, like I say, number 3 classes 2 years in a row, despite the fact that the Brew McCoy loss kind of skews the number a little bit. Still, I mean, you're recruiting at a very, very high level. You should be able to replace these players, especially by late in the year. Things should start to gel for you. On your special teams, you're in pretty good shape as far as your field goal kicker goes. 18 of 52 last year with a long of 52 yards. That would be Cameron Dicker. Yeah, that's his name. 51 of 52 on extra points. So he's almost automatic. Your punting game needs some help. 36.7 yards a punt. That's not good. We're going to look at your schedule next, all 12 games, and figure it out. Are you going to be able to get to that 9.5 wins? You're going to be able to unseat Oklahoma? We're going to talk about these teams next. Here's our 2019 Texas Longhorns slate, and it's a challenging schedule. I mean, it really is. And most of your tougher, not your toughest, but your tougher Big 12 games are actually on the road this year. So that can have an outcome in this final record. So we're going to start off at home with a game against Louisiana Tech, a team that you've never met before, even though geographically not that far away. They do return a senior running back and a senior quarterback who does not exactly have great passing numbers, throwing a lot of interceptions, but it's a team that could give you some problems for a while. An experienced team. I expect this game to be close at halftime, and I expect them to come in there and play you close, but we're going to give you the win there. You'll pull away in Louisiana Tech. Just no match for Texas in that game. Second game of the season, probably one of the, if not the most highly anticipated non-conference games of the offseason. LSU makes the visit into Austin, Texas to take on the Longhorns. This is a game that's going to... everybody's going to be watching this. All eyes are going to be on Austin that night. LSU is going to bring a huge following of fans over from Baton Rouge to Austin for this game. They are you guys are in the 11, 12, 13 range in most of the preseason polls. Some of them actually have you inside the top 10. LSU, depending on whether you look, is anywhere between 7 and 9. So pretty even matchup. Their defensive line, I feel like, is going to be one of the differences here. And one of the things that I think will just be a little bit too much for you to overcome. Their quarterback play, while I wouldn't say it's been pedestrian, the Joe Burrow, he was good enough last year to win and improved a lot down the stretch. He's got a coach from the Saints coming in this year to kind of help him a little bit, to instill a little bit more of a spread attack there and a little bit more of a dynamic to that offense. And despite the fact that this is a home game for you, it's a huge one. I think it's going to be a very close game. If I had to pick a spread on it right now, I'm not sure that I could, but I still think that LSU is going to come out on top here. I'm going to give you the loss in that game. And don't just look at that and say, well, who's your fan of an SEC team, so he's a homer. No, I did an LSU video, and it's been almost 2 months ago, and if you'll go back and look at that, I said pretty much the same things. You're replacing a lot on your defense. It's going to be early in the season. Those guys may not be gelled together quite yet. I think in LSU, with the added dynamic to that offense, is going to be a little bit too much for you. You're going to take the loss in that game. The next week, you're on the road. You're actually playing at Rice, which is located in Houston, Texas, but you're playing in the Houston Texans Stadium. My guessing on that is that Rice rented out that stadium from the Texans for this purpose of selling a bunch of tickets to Texas fans because, let's just face it, Rice doesn't have a very good football program, one of the worst teams in FBS. They're actually not even a Power 5 school anymore, are they? Or were they ever? They're Conference USA. You're going to take the win there against Rice. You'll beat them a lot to a little. The next game is your Big 12 opener. You are at home against the Cowboys of Oklahoma State. Now, you lost to these guys last year, so this needs to be a little bit of a revenge spot for you. They're breaking in a new quarterback, but their coach, Mike Gundy, that's his position, quarterback. So they shouldn't have a lot of problems getting him adapted to what's going on there. You're replacing the front end of your defense Or they're actually replacing the front of their defense, excuse me. So you should be able to run against them, and that's the reason I'm calling this a win for you guys. I think that you'll take back that loss from last year, get a little bit of revenge on the Oklahoma State Cowboys, who I think will probably end up to be about a 7-win team, and will get better down the stretch. They always seem to, but I think at this point of the season, you're just going to be too much for them, and especially with that game being in Austin. The next week, you're on the road at West Virginia. This team was hit harder by attrition than pretty much anybody in the Big 12. You actually lost to them last year at home, but they have to replace their quarterback, Brill Greer, some NFL wide receivers, and 3 offensive linemen. They do have a good running back returning, and they also lost their head coach, Dana Holgerson, who's been there since I think around 2010. So a lot of changes in Morgantown coming this fall. Before they play you, they actually have some pretty decent non-con tests on the road at Missouri, and then a home game against NC State. I'm kind of expecting them to split those games, lose the game at Missouri, and win the game at home against NC State. They were actually supposed to play NC State last year. That game was canceled due to hurricane problems. Be careful with them. Coach Neil Brown always seems to kind of reload his teams, especially did at Troy when he was the coach there, which is a really good coach at Troy. So this is why he's got the job at West Virginia now, moving on up to a Power 5 school. But I'm going to give you the win in that game. I think that just the fact that they have so much inexperience is going to just be too much against a team like Texas. I wouldn't sleep on them, though, if I were some other Big 12 teams. I think they may pull a few shockers, but not against you guys. The next week is the game in the Cotton Bowl against the Oklahoma Sooners. Oklahoma is a team I'm concerned about their offensive line. They lost 4 players there to the draft, but they got some highly talented players behind them replacing them. I mean, Lincoln Riley is an offensive-minded head coach. I mean, they're not going to ignore the fact that they, have some attrition on the offensive line. The fact that these guys were playing behind NFL draft pick further just tells me they're going to be ready. I mean, because they've been learning from some of the best. Your defense is going to be kind of suspect. I mean, let's just face it, you're replacing a lot of talent there. They got Jalen Hurts coming in at quarterback. You say what you want to about him. He was 24-2 as a starter at Alabama. He won a national championship there. He was always much maligned about his style of play, but, I mean, he won football games. He was a game manager, and I think that under Lincoln Riley, he's going to be able to put some of his skills to work, finally, instead of just handing the ball off all the time. CeeDee Lamb, wide receiver, they got a 1-2 punch with Trey Sermon and Kennedy Brooks, running back. Their defense did give up a ton of yards last year, but the new defensive coordinator they got coming in, Alex Grinch from Ohio State, figures to get that cleaned up somewhat. If they can get that defense just cleaned up somewhat, I think that's going to be enough to beat you guys. And I have already found out, talking about Texas videos, if I ever put up something about Texas, it's negative, man. I just get flooded with, last year when I picked Georgia to cover the spread in that game, God, I just got flooded from everywhere. And danged if I wasn't wrong. But I'm going to pick you to lose this game. Sorry, I just have to go with my feeling here. I'm going to put a watch on it, though, because I think that is one you are capable of winning. But as for right now, I am taking Oklahoma to win the game against Texas. The next week, you are back at home against Kansas Jayhawks. Les Miles takes over as the head coach here. That was kind of a head-scratching hire, especially at the head coach that they had before, David Beatty, had won one game, I believe it was, in 2016 and 2017. He won, I think 3 last year, 3 or 4, which was the best season they'd had in a while, and they still ended up letting him go. So in comes Les Miles. You've won 4 or 5 against them. Actually got upset in 2016. Charlie Strong's last year probably led to him getting fired. You haven't always covered against them, though, and haven't played your best against them, though. They're off of a bye week, and this is a game where, I mean, I'm going to see that you win it. I don't think you're going to have a lot of problems doing so, but I could see you possibly not covering the spread here. Again, you got a tough opponent coming up on the road, and I'm thinking you're probably going to be kind of looking back in your rearview mirror at a loss and wondering what that's going to cost you. But I still think you take the win over Kansas. They don't have the talent, the Jimmies or the Johns, to compete with Texas, at least not this year and probably not for the foreseeable future. Next week, you're on the road at TCU. And this one may make some people mad. This is a team that typically bounces back under Gary Patterson after bad years. They were 7-6 last year. In 2016, I think they were 6-7. They bounced back in 2017 and come back 11-3. Same thing a few years before that. I think it was 2013. They're 4-8. They come back in 2014 and come back in 11-2. So he's always going to have this team in the mix. They had a ton of injuries last year. Had 20 players out at some point or another during the season. You've lost 4 or 5 of these guys. You know, I have a feeling that you're going to be looking ahead to the bye week that you're going to get after that, which, I mean, you should be. I mean, you've played Oklahoma a couple of weeks before. You got to Oklahoma State week before that, which is probably not going to be an easy game either, although I do expect it to be a victory. It's just a tough spot for you in a place you have not played well recently. And this is a game that I'm going to give you a kind of a letdown. I'm going to give you a loss here, but we're going to put a watch on it because I'm not totally convinced of that 100%. I'm not convinced of anything happening 100%, to be honest with you. Anything could happen on any given Saturday. But I think that TCU is going to be good this year. I think they're going to surprise a lot of people, and I'm picking them to beat you here the week after the Texas game. So you'll have a bye week, and you come back and you face Kansas State. This is another team that a lot of people are picking towards the bottom of the Big 12. And look kind of strange to not see Bill Snyder over on the sidelines coaching the Kansas State Wildcats this year. He's been there for close to 30 years, or it may have been right at 30 years. But the head coach, Chris Kleiman, that takes over, he knows how to win. This guy's won several of the FCS national championships as the head coach at North Dakota State. And if nothing else, I think this team got kind of stale the last few years under Schneider. I think that they were just kind of, the brakes on the train were already applied, and they were just kind of coasting into the depot a little bit because they knew he was getting ready to go in a couple of years, and it didn't have a lot of success. But this guy, I think, really is going to get this team back up to a high level of play again. He may actually take them to a college football playoff in a few years. It's not inconceivable that might not be done at Kansas State. They've got a tradition there under Bill Snyder. They know how to win, and I think that he's going to take them to a high level of play. I don't think it's going to happen this year. They're replacing a little bit. They're returning most of their defense, however. Don't look to score a lot of points against these guys. I do think you're going to win this game. I think you're just much better at the skill positions. That's a W. Everybody knows it. Kind of messed it up. You're much better at the skill positions, even though I think that they're not going to let you score a ton of points on them, and they're not going to let you blow them out. They're going to play some teams tough this year, but I think you take the win against Kansas State in that spot. Here's another one that I'm not sold on. You're on the road at Iowa State the next week. A lot of the teams have struggled the past couple of years with Iowa State. Traditionally, you haven't. It seems like with the reputation that they've got in the past couple of years, for some reason it just seems like this is a team year in, year out that just gives everybody a fit. People don't really look at the fact that they only really started getting decent in 2017 under Matt Campbell. They won 8 then. They won 8 last year. Prior to that, this was a 3-win team a season. Well, they won 8 games back-to-back the last couple of years. And this is probably going to be the best team that Matt Campbell's had there out of the 4 years that he's been in Ames. They actually could be undefeated prior to the previous week's matchup. Now, previous to this, they play Oklahoma. They play Oklahoma before they play y'all, and there's no bye week in between. I'm not sold on this one. I think that Oklahoma State has what it takes to beat you guys, especially playing at home. This is just in the past couple of years been a tough place for other teams to play. But I'm going to give you the win here. I'm going to put a watch on it, however. Fundamentally, I'm not sure that you're better than Iowa State. Just fundamentally, I'm not. I think that their defense is going to be a little more solid than what yours is. So it remains to be seen if you can move the ball against them effectively. However, situationally, Oklahoma may be your best friend in this situation because I think you're going to soften them up a little bit the week before. And that's going to give you the edge that you need to beat this team on the road. This is another one I'm not sold on. I'm putting a watch on it because I'm definitely not 100% on this one, but I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt and taking a win here. The next week, you're on the road against Baylor. This is a team that, they hit rock bottom, in 2016. They won one game in Matt Rule's first year. This has been a several-year rebuilding plan down there. They won the bowl game last year. They finished up 6-6 and won the bowl game against Vanderbilt, one of the better bowl games of the year. What was that, the Texas Bowl? They also played Oklahoma the year before, or the week before. They play y'all as well. So the schedule gods weren't kind to some of these teams. Their non-conference schedule is a joke. They also play at Rice. I don't know what Rice is trying to do here, getting some big paydays. Have a lot of fans there probably from Baylor to make the trip to Houston as well. You've beaten them 4 years in a row. This is another team that I think is in that position like Iowa State is, just to be a thorn in everybody's side. But I think they're probably 1 year away. I think they're probably 1 year behind the level that Iowa State is at right now. But it's still a dangerous spot. Charlie Brewer, the quarterback, returns, along with all of his skill position players, are returning 7 on a defense, which should be better. They were 86th in the country last year, which is not good. But they're just looking at their Big 12 wins last year. Their Big 12 wins were against the bottom layer teams of the Big 12. The one that stands out as actually being a good win was a 35-31 victory against Oklahoma State. So I'm going to give you a win here in this situation also at Baylor, but we're going to put a watch on that too. This could be a dangerous team. I may not be giving them enough credit here. Matt Rule, also a good coach. He's done a rebuilding job at Temple, and now he's almost gotten to the point where he's near completing his rebuild at Baylor, and done it a lot quicker, I think, than a lot of people would have thought. The last week of the season, you're at home against Texas Tech. This was a team that the last 4 meetings that you've played them have been one-possession games, even though most of the time you've been a little bit better of a team than them. One-possession games. They've got a new offensive scheme coming in, new head coach, Matt Wells, who comes over from Utah State. Had a lot of success there with that quarterback, Jordan Love. And he's got a quarterback there, Alan Bowman, who is one that's got a lot of potential. But they're probably going to run a little bit more than they have in the past. Texas Tech's always been known as an air raid team. Under Matt Wells, his offensive philosophy is a little bit different, so they may run the ball a little bit more than what you're used to seeing Texas Tech do in the past. However, I think they're just a year away from being any kind of contender or giving any of the upper echelon Big 12 teams any kind of a challenge. So it'll probably be a game that's probably going to be close again, because by this time of the season, everybody's pretty much going to be figured out who's going where. I'm going to give you the win in this game, and I'm not going to put a watch on that. I'm pretty solid that you're going to end up with the win over Texas Tech. So by my breakdown here, you're going to finish up the record of 9-3, which you finished 9-3 last year, and that would actually leave you short of that Vegas 9.5 win total. So there you go, the final breakdown on the 2019 Texas Longhorns. I have you going 9-3. Now, this does not mean that you could not make it into the Big 12 championship game. This would put you at 7-2 in the conference. Last year, you finished up at 7-2 in the conference as well, and you made it to the championship game. However, one of the regular season losses last year wasn't to Oklahoma. This year, I'm calling for you to lose to Oklahoma in the regular season. So depending on how it breaks down amongst all the other teams, you could conceivably end up playing Oklahoma in the Big 12 championship game, who would be my pick to be on the other side of that equation. I mean, if you don't get there to it, the only other possibility I could possibly see is a TCU Oklahoma matchup in the championship game, or possibly an Iowa State Oklahoma matchup. You laugh about that, but it's definitely possible. I think that this team, although I picked TCU to be the team that you lose to, just because of where it's at on the schedule, you could also lose at Iowa State and actually beat TCU. But of the games at TCU, at Oklahoma State, and at Baylor, I do not think you're going 3-0 in those games. I think you're going 2-1 in those games. You're losing one of those teams. On this, I have TCU as my model. Oklahoma, I think, is a loss just based off the fact that their offense is so dynamic, and with your young defense, I just don't think you're going to be able to stop them. I think you're going to score some points on them, but it's not going to be enough to win. The LSU game early in the season, I feel like you're going to lose that game. If it were very late in the season, I could see you possibly having a chance there after your defense is gelled somewhat, but I just don't see it happening in week number 2. This puts you at 9-3 and coming short of that 9.5 mark that Las Vegas has for you guys. Now, I've come to realize throughout my years of doing these college football videos that the Texas fans are very passionate. I'm sure when you see this that you'll be down in the comment section below giving me pushback, let me know why I'm stupid and I don't know what I'm talking about here. And, I mean, I could be stupid. I could not know what I'm talking about here, but just looking at the number of starters you got coming back and kind of researching this stuff, this is the best opinion that I can come up with at this time. Some of these guys you got coming in on defense could be monsters. They could be all-stars. They could be guys that are going to come back in there. They're going to take over starting positions right off the bat and make a huge impact. Your defensive numbers from last year are going to be improved even more, despite the fact that you've lost 8 starters. And you get where I'm coming from. I think 9-3 is a very respectable record, and I think if Ellinger were to come back for the senior season next year in 2020, I think this is a team that could definitely be talked about as far as a playoff contender spot, but I don't see you making a college football playoff. I don't see you winning the Big 12. I think you're probably going to finish up second there, and that's just how I see this going down. Give me your thoughts down below on Texas. Let me know what you think. Let me know, are they going to finish first? Are they going to finish second to Oklahoma? Or could they possibly finish even worse than that and somebody else sneak in at the number 2 spot? All those scenarios are possible. Let me know your feedback. Hope you enjoyed the video, guys. If you did, please hit it with a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. We're posting college football preview videos against Vegas all year, and we are also going to be posting picks against the Las Vegas spread when college football season actually kicks off in about 6 weeks. I'll see y'all later. Peace. I'm out of here. Go Gamecocks. Spurs up to my toes up. That's not a Longhorn. That's a Spurs up for me. I'll see y'all later.